So the houses of the Oireachtas. It's important that people have full access and get engaged in the debates, governmental debates. And since the recognition of the Act in 2017, we have the team of interpreters, which is their 4th anniversary today.
Wow.
It's hard work, 4 years. And that was the same day, 4 years ago, Dr. John Bosco Conema, who ran for the Seanad. And it was actually the same day they started the work in the houses of the Oireachtas. Now, maybe a little bit of the background information, and it's important to mention that Caroline O'Leary is CODA, Child of Deaf Adult, and Ciara Grant, they're both working together in the houses of the Oireachtas. They're team interpreters. And we would like to know a little bit more. We're really interested to know about the work and the way they work and the interpretation they provide, and also in development of the glossary of parliamentary terminology. They were working really hard to develop this glossary because they relied strongly on finger spelling. So it was very important to create the glossary that Caroline O'Leary and Ciara Grant are using nowadays in Parliament. And just to mention that Caroline is she loves cycling, and Ciara is a passionate runner. So we have very fit women in our Parliament. So I would like to welcome you both and looking forward to your presentation. So Caroline is first.
Hello, everyone. And thanks so much for joining us here today, both online and some in person. This is the first time I've actually presented here in CDS. Of course, I've been here at different events, but I've never actually been here to present myself. So it's been a lot of work to get here to actually present today after 3 years of working on this project. So I'd just like to explain a little bit about how it all started. So if you remember, the Irish Deaf Society campaigned very hard for 30 years for ISL recognition, which was eventually passed in 2017. And really, that was the start of a big change in the House of the Oireachtas. Because the House of the Oireachtas wanted to be a leader when it came to government departments, when it came to ISL recognition and inclusion. I have a very short video that I'm going to show you. It's about a minute long. It talks about how the ISL Act was passed and a little bit about the work that myself and Ciara do. Maybe move the bar there, Caroline, sorry. So it's up here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can move that bar down. This one? Yeah. There you go.
6 years ago, the Houses of the Oireachtas passed the Irish Sign Language Act 2017. The Act recognises the duty on all public bodies to provide Irish Sign Language users with free interpretation when availing of or seeking to access statutory entitlements and services, and that the community of persons using Irish Sign Language shall have the right to use, develop and preserve Irish Sign Language.
The Minister to move that the bill do now pass. I move. So the question is that agreed? So a message was. Now, it's not usual, but you're very welcome, and you're very welcome to interrupt proceedings because it's an historic bill.
Since the bill was enacted, the Houses of the Oireachtas recruited 2 in-house ISL interpreters and established a dedicated ISL studio. The ISL team provides high standards of interpretation for Oireachtas platforms such as the website and increased levels of daily coverage on the Oireachtas TV channel. ISL translation is provided on some sections of the Houses of the Oireachtas website, www.oireachtas.ie.
So, after quite a long time now since that video was made, you can see the difference in Ciara's hair length. But it just gives a little bit of background about the kind of work that we do. And it has taken quite a lot of time to come to this moment. It wasn't just that this was all set up overnight. There was a lot of consultation with different deaf organisations and representatives and stakeholders, and to actually decide what was the best, most important way, important things to include when coming to ISL provision. And so they created a working document on the recommendations for sign language interpreters within the Houses of the Oireachtas. And they decided to employ 2 in-house interpreters. And from then on until now, we've continued our work within the Houses of the Oireachtas. We began our work just at the beginning of COVID. So it was, it was terribly quiet. There wasn't anybody around the Houses of the Oireachtas campus. Myself, I started first, and then Ciara came a little bit later. And then we began our interpreting together. And even when we began interpreting our parliamentary content, there was a lot of fingerspelling. We were dependent on fingerspelling because there just simply weren't the signs there. We also had to learn a lot about the processes within government and proceedings within the Houses of the Oireachtas, between the Dáil and the Seanad. And there was a lot of information, a lot of content that we had to get to grips with. And the ISL Act 2017 says that all public bodies must have interpreters employed from the register, from the Register of Irish Sign Language Interpreters, RISLI. And so myself and Ciara are full-time in the House of the Oireachtas, but of course we are also on the RISLI register, and we make sure to complete our CPD hours in order to stay on it. So we're not just closed in the government, we are out in the community, we are mixing and mingling. We provide live interpretation in the House of the Oireachtas, House of Oireachtas TV. So parliamentary sitting days are Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursdays, and on those days we cover leaders' questions on promised policy and legislation, and Taoiseach's questions. So they're the most important business items that we would cover on a daily basis. We also cover items within the Seanad, which include commencement matters, which is usually about 2 or 3 times a week. There's 3 parts of the House of the Oireachtas. There is the Dáil, the Seanad, and then there's the President. It's also a branch of the Oireachtas. So we also work on parts of the website translation for the House of the Oireachtas. And we also work on some content from President Higgins. So we did a series he called Machnamh, which was a lecture series, which we interpreted. We also have visitors and tours to the House of the Oireachtas, and that started about 2 years ago. And that's how people can come to visit the Oireachtas. A lot of the time it's booked through a member, a TD or a senator. Or if any of you are actually interested in coming to visit the House of the Oireachtas, and if you'd like an ISL tour, just contact your local TD and ask to please be invited in to the Oireachtas, and we'll be able to provide you with an ISL interpreted tour. Also, when deaf people come in to visit the House of the Oireachtas, it may be because there's a House of the Oireachtas committee that would like to invite a deaf witness in. So, for example, the Joint Committee on Disability Matters have invited deaf witnesses into the committee rooms. And so we would actually interpret in person in the committee room. And if there are no deaf witnesses present within the committee room, we would interpret from the studio, and that's live streamed on the TV and internet channels. Another part of our work is some education outreach, which we've done. There's an education outreach officer within the Houses of the Oireachtas, and he works with TY students in different schools. It was just hearing schools up until a few years ago when we were able to do some outreach with the deaf school, and we were able to provide the course he provides to the deaf school. And really, it's very important when it comes to this education outreach because it's educating about democracy. So students are learning this in school. It's about their own personal responsibilities as a citizen and what that means. And so over time, it gently builds their knowledge and lets them think, what is my role within society? And particularly for the deaf schools, it's important that that outreach is provided so that students can learn from an early age and be more comfortable with these kind of societal responsibilities that we all have, and have a better understanding of politics and the importance of participation in the political world. And it's quite a challenge, to be able to interpret clearly so that it's in an understandable way and that the meaning is correctly conveyed to these groups of students. It's one word can mean a lot of things, so it is definitely a challenge. So that's part of the reason why we needed a glossary to accurately interpret these. Thank you for your assistance. And we also work very closely with the Centre for Deaf Studies. And we're very happy to see interpreting students come on place of the Oireachtas. Because of COVID rules and restrictions, unfortunately at the beginning it had to be online only, but now we're able to provide some in-person placements. And I know so much has changed with COVID, online and in person, how we work, and the world has completely changed. And really it's a lot of changes that we've had to go through. So it's very important to make sure that the deaf community also had access to political proceedings live at the same time a hearing audience would. And it's also important to encourage students themselves that interpreting in political and parliamentary proceedings and broadcaster proceedings, not to have any kind of fear instilled in them, to actually make them comfortable in the environment little by little, to build their confidence that one day, and maybe later in their career, possibly myself and Caroline might need more interpreters brought in to support us, to work with us on something, that those interpreters actually have that experience. And they've seen our work in the Houses of the Oireachtas, and that confidence and that experience that's been instilled will actually help them, and also help them with their parliamentary knowledge as well, which they would have learned. So we love to see students work with us. Another part of our work in the House of the Oireachtas, myself and Ciara, we have to remember there's some very important things we need to mark, like National ISL Day, International Week of Deaf People. And Leinster House actually lit up blue in recognition of this. And it's also important, it's not just myself and Ciara popping on and off the screen. It's important to remember that it is in fact a community that we need involvement from and need to be involved with. One of our colleagues actually in the library service in the Houses of the Oireachtas, she actually learned ISL a long time ago, and recently asked if the ISL team would set up an ISL cafe every Tuesday to chat and be able to practice ISL. So now we have people becoming more familiar with us, seeing sign language around the Leinster House complex, which is a new development. So yes, there is employed interpreters in the House of the Oireachtas, but step by step, that's actually building a little bit more awareness and more visibility of interpreters and sign language. So just to go back to our glossary project, Ciara and myself began interpreting parliamentary proceedings. And really, when it came to parliamentary language and the words that are used within the Parliament, and the different procedures that are used, all sorts of different kinds of examples like Brexit, Stormont, protocols, the Northern Ireland Protocol. These are things that just kept coming up again and again and again, which we felt if we were to explain would just take too long because we just didn't have time in such a fast-paced environment. And at the same time, with the STEM project happening in DCU, for terminology there, and the Justice Science Project had also got up and running. And we felt, why don't we do the same thing? So we decided to link in with CDS to see if it was possible to work with the deaf interpreting students who were studying at the time, if they'd be willing to work with us and start to work on this project. And thankfully, they did. So here we are now. So I'm going to hand over to Ciara, and she's going to explain a little bit more about what happened.
Right. Thank you, Caroline. I'm not going to go into very deep detail or theory or background and everything and the reasons for the need for this project. But as Caroline mentioned, interpreting parliamentary proceedings brings up a lot of terminology that we didn't have an exact match in ISL. And we thought, well, what are we going to do? Parliamentary interpreting is fast-paced. And politicians speak really, really fast. And as interpreters, we were trying to keep up. So there are different coping strategies you can use, but sometimes we were limited in the time we had in order to interpret. So we were stuck with the finger spelling or using replacements or paraphrasing. But time was against us. And the two of us felt, you know what, we really need to do something. We felt like we were really missing the essence sometimes of what it is we were attempting to interpret. So, luckily, at the same time, the Centre for Deaf Studies was running an Introduction to Deaf Interpreting course. And there was 24 deaf students in the course of various backgrounds and ages, and various experience within the deaf community. We thought this is an ideal opportunity for us, a great chance for us to see if the CDS students, we could work with them, develop a project together, and make it part of the deaf interpreting students' coursework to create these new signs that we really needed. Because Caroline and I can't go inventing signs in a vacuum. We've got to do it with the deaf community. We needed the deaf community to link in with as stakeholders in creating these new signs. We need that.
For those at home who maybe couldn't see off camera, we're just changing things so it's more visually pleasing for deaf sign language users or those who are enjoying the ISL.
Back on. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Isabel. Right. So thankfully, the CDS agreed to work with us. We were so relieved. So myself and Caroline created a list of 80 terms that we felt we were most stuck for having an ISL equivalent. We felt these were most important to us and they would be of great value to us if we had an ISL equivalent for this. So we gave the list to Teresa Lynch and Centre for Deaf Studies. So I'm going to show you a video now of Teresa Lynch explaining the benefits of being involved in this project and what happened once the list was given over to deaf students to work on it, to create these new signs.
Hello, my name is Teresa Lynch. I am an assistant professor in the Centre for Deaf Studies, Trinity College Dublin, working part-time. And for the past 30 years, I've worked part-time as a deaf interpreter. Professor Lorraine Leeson and I were thrilled to be approached by Caroline O'Leary and Ciara Grant to ask if the deaf interpreting students could be involved in creating signs for parliamentary terminology for use in the Houses of the Oireachtas. Similarly, we were conscious of the fact that the signs that are used in political discourse are not the same as language used in everyday conversation. When a new term arises, typically it is fingerspelled, which is a feature of ISL. When Caroline and Ciara explained to us the difficulty in interpreting for live TV broadcast for political and parliamentary speeches and proceedings, which results in fast-paced fingerspelling within the interpretation, that's when we realised the language needs to change as languages do evolve. When Caroline and Ciara asked if the deaf interpreting students could be involved in the creation of signs for parliamentary terminology, Professor Lorraine Leeson and I saw this as a good idea to include this as part of the ISL linguistics module, which the students have been studying. And we thought, why not link the two? As to how the deaf interpreting students created the signs, as I mentioned earlier, signs cannot be created unilaterally. It's important that there is an element of compromise. For example, to change some fingerspell terms, and particularly older generations of adults are very proud of the use of fingerspelling in ISL, and to change that to vocabulary signs, the right balance needs to be struck. There is now new vocabulary that we never knew before, and political terms within the glossary, but there are now signs that can be used within that context. As to how the students went about this, firstly, 4 groups of 3 students each were set up. They were given 20 parliamentary terms each to create signs for. After they created the signs, the groups exchanged their versions and analysed them and provided feedback as to whether the signs worked or not. It was a continuous process of feedback until agreement on the signs was reached. They then met with different stakeholders in the deaf community, for example, older generations of deaf people, the Irish Deaf Society, ISL teachers, deaf people who were strongly involved in politics, and they then met with Caroline and Ciara. The groups discussed whether the versions of the signs made sense, if they would work in the context, if there were signs that worked very well, and some fingerspell signs which were decided to stay that way. Once the process of collecting feedback was finished, the groups brought their work back to the class module to present to each other. They explained why they made changes to signs, why some stayed the same, how this related to the context taking into account ISL linguistics. The presentations were assessed and given a grade. It was really good because it broadened their minds about feedback from the deaf community rather than deciding themselves, which is a really good process for them. The students had to think about the process and how signs develop over time, because as we know, signs never stay the same, they continue to evolve. The engagement with the deaf community, because ISL belongs to them, it is their sign language, and our role in the deaf community in using ISL is to ensure that there is acceptance, and where there is not, to listen, to understand, and to respect them. It's important that this will continue because there is such strong sign variation within ISL. For example, within the deaf school, they do not have a standardized version of ISL. It is continuously changing. International sign language influences coming from social media also factor into this. through consultation an agreement is reached. Of course, it will not always be 100% the same, but it is important that through this consensus, the deaf people are satisfied and happy that the signs are easy to understand. And of course, it always depends on the context. We must continue this consultation, not just for the houses of the Oireachtas. My dream and hopes for the deaf community is that in the area of broadcasting, on TV, the news, social media, government debates, that a deaf interpreter would be involved, working with a hearing theatre interpreter as a team. I would love to see more and more interpreters working in this area. I'd love to see it more to ensure full access for the deaf community, to provide more opportunities for them to work with hearing interpreters. That would be lovely.
Thank you, Teresa Lynch. Thank you for the beautiful video that we used as part of our presentation. We included this, and every time we show it, it's so emotional when we see it. So that shows an overall summary explanation of how the deaf interpreters came to be involved in creating these new signs and the glossary. So that when that part of the project was finished, myself and Caroline, the videos were submitted to us, and then we had to decide, well, what are we going to do with these videos of new signs? Here we had 80 signs. We needed more feedback on what the wider deaf community thought about the new signs. So we thought, well, what are we going to do next? So what we did, we categorized the signs into 3 lists. The first list of signs was the red list, green list. And this was a list where we felt that these signs were either already out there in the community in use somewhat, or we felt they would work well and would be accepted well in the deaf community. So that was like our okay list. The second list was our amber list, if you like, which was newly created signs that we thought, okay, these are good. They look like they'd work well. They could be included in future interpretations. They made somewhat sense in the context that they would be used in, but we needed to see what the feedback would be on those signs. And then the red list of signs were signs that we felt and that the students also felt were a bit iffy, if you like, needed a bit more time to be worked on and developed further. So what we did then was, we said, well, how are we going to go out into the deaf community to collect feedback? So remember, we're talking in COVID times, restriction times, no face-to-face contact. We thought, well, what can we do to try and link in with the deaf community? So we worked with the Houses of the Oireachtas web team, and we created an online interactive survey of the glossary. We recorded the 80 signs we received, we re-recorded them for the interactive survey. We created 10 videos. Each video had 8 signs in it. And that included the finger spelling of the word, the sign, and a little explanation about what the sign meant and what this new sign looked like. And underneath that, surveyors could click and respond, yeah, I like that sign, or no, I wouldn't use that sign. There was also a text box where comments could be added in, or suggestions or ideas or any other feedback. And also surveyors were also welcome to contact the ISL team and give us their feedback in an ISL video if they prefer to do that way. So the survey was created and published on the House of Oireachtas website. So the Ceann Comhairle himself, Sean O'Friel TD, launched it first back, I believe, in April. April 2021. 2001, 2. And it remained on the website until December 2022. It was shared extensively in social media through social media platforms at the Houses of the Oireachtas. We shared it to all deaf organisations through email. So it was there for quite a lengthy time. However, we only received 10 responses. And we thought, okay, the reason for that may be how lengthy the survey was, because 8 signs and 10 videos, going through each one, watching them all, maybe re-watching, it would have taken up about an hour of a person's time. So it was quite a high expectation. We thought maybe not everybody would finish the survey in full. So when we created the survey, we strategically put the red signs to the front of the survey so that we would get most likely the most responses on those signs before people gave up finishing the survey. We felt it was important to try and get as much feedback as we could on the lists, the red list of signs. So I'm showing you now on the PowerPoint what the list looked like, what the survey looked like, and who responded. And then you can see the different videos that are there by clicking on. You can see how they could click yes or no, their responses to each sign. But because we only got 10 responses, that wasn't enough. We knew we needed more, a lot more. So luckily, COVID restrictions were eased somewhat, and that meant we could do face-to-face outreach with the deaf community. So we decided to approach the deaf senior citizens at the day centre in Deaf Village, which was fantastic. It was a great opportunity to meet those who have such specific language expertise, and given their age, their experience, wisdom, we wanted to collect all their feedback. And typically this particular group not everybody is savvy to using technology. So it was a great way to meet people face to face to get their feedback. We met them twice. And that totaled 69 deaf senior citizens, including 3 deaf-blind members of the community. So Caroline and I, Teresa came on one of the occasions, and other members of the House of Oireachtas web team came to help us to carry out a survey at the outreach session. And then when we met the group, we used a similar format as what was provided in the online survey. We showed the videos of each sign. We asked everybody there to vote. We gave cards to each person in the room, red card for no, green card for yes. So they raised which card if they agreed or disagreed with the proposed new sign. So there was much discussion and thoughts shared, other ideas, questions in terms of the signs that we would use. And we videoed signed responses also if somebody wanted to leave us with a clip that we could take back and review later when we were reviewing all the feedback. So also we met with deaf and hearing interpreters in November 2022. That was an online webinar we hosted through MS Teams. And again, the same format was used. We showed the videos of the signs we needed the most feedback on. We asked deaf and hearing interpreters for their ideas, suggestions and comments. And we used the voting system we used through the chat facility on MS Teams. And then we recorded those votes for our feedback collation later. When that was done, we've worked with CDS, we've gone out to the deaf community, we've collated all the feedback. So now we thought, right, now what are we going to do with all the feedback? So we had to make a decision on what was going to be the final version of each sign. So again, myself and Caroline said, we can't make this decision on our own. We need relevant stakeholders with expertise to help us with this. So we set up an ISL expert panel. There was 6 members on that panel, balanced deaf and hearing, deaf and hearing, linguists, academics, interpreters, very familiar with interpreters familiar with interpreting and politics. And it was a balanced group. It was very important to us that it was 50% deaf, 50% hearing. And the group was tasked with analysing the feedback we received and go through each sign to agree on a final version of each sign. And that meant that some signs were amended, slightly changed. It also meant that some of our terms didn't just have one sign. There may be two versions of one sign, two versions of a term, or even three. And also, some signs were decided best left as a fingerspelled word. The group expert panel met 6 times. Each meeting was about an hour and a half of discussion. And then when that was finished, we had our 80 finalized terms ready for publication. Well, it's important to mention that for this group, every time we met, it wasn't possible that all 6 people were there, but we never held a meeting without a deaf person in the meeting. So there was deaf input at all stages. Now we're going to show you some examples of the signs that were created. So as I mentioned, we had 3 lists. We had a green list, and an example of someone from the green list is the sign for democracy. That sign we knew was pretty much out there in the community already in use. So that was ready to roll. An example of a sign from our amber list: commencement matters. So what that is when ministers are questioned in the Shannon chamber on particular relevant issues to a senator. So when that was first created, we had Shannon questions minister. But through the process of gathering feedback, that was agreed. What did the deaf community think? And what did the ISL expert group? That was agreed, and we agreed to keep it as that. And then I have an example from the red list. And let me just check, am I on orange or red?
Orange.
Red. So there were some amendments done on signs from the orange list. For example, the sign for cabinet. So initially it was ministers sitting along, if you like, a table like this classifier handshake. But through discussion, it was felt that this didn't look right, it wasn't appropriate. So then we kind of found out that more often what was often used was a curved shape, like sitting around a table, like a ministerial table that they would sit around to discuss. So it was decided to amend that sign to ministers and classifier handshake, semicircle around a table.
Here we go. Okay.
And lastly, another example from the red list. There's a sign front bench. We needed a sign for front bench. So in government, a spokesperson or someone in opposition for any of the particular political parties in opposition, or a minister, they are considered front bench. So the sign initially that was submitted to us was stand up and present, but it didn't really work in the context, because actually any member of government can stand up and speak in either chamber as a spokesperson. But a different term that had been submitted was for backbench. And that sign, the group suggested doing this handshake classifier coming out from your shoulder to show they're sitting in the back, towards the back of the Dáil chamber. So when the ISL expert group saw backbench, they thought, okay, well, wouldn't it make sense to just do front bench this way? Just bring it to the front. So that's an example of how a sign from the red list was amended and approved. And another thing to mention, the ISL expert group felt it was an important process to include and keep some signs fingerspelled, because fingerspelling is such an integral part of ISL. And we wanted to make sure to preserve that. Very recently, December 14th, National ISL Day. We finally launched the final version of the ISL glossary of 80 new parliamentary terminology. And you can access that on the Oireachtas website. We have a link provided in our slides to it. We worked again with the web team for finalising the glossary. We wanted it to be very clear. We wanted it to be accessible, easy to find. We looked at other examples of glossaries provided online, sign language glossaries around the world. And another feedback from the ISL expert group, they want to make sure to include an explanation of what the word a new sign is, not just show the new sign. So that's what we've done. We've provided that. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. Thank you. So that gives you a little idea of what you can access on the House of Oireachtas website. We have the page there for you to look at. If you're not sure of the word, you can just type in to the search bar to see if a word you're particularly looking for is in the list. So that we've started using the terminology within our interpretations, but this is in fact a live dictionary. It will continue to develop over time. And if we're lucky, we're going to keep linking in with CDS. Very important to us to strengthen and keep that relationship and keep working with deaf interpreters, because we can't create signs without the deaf community. We need to work together to create signs and terminology. So to summarize our final thoughts, our project really showed the importance of working with the deaf community, making sure to collect the feedback, value the feedback, include it. All projects like this must work. It's work with the deaf community. It's the only way. And Caroline and I will continue to improve ISL access within the houses of the Oireachtas. And we hope to develop other projects into the future. Bravo.
Thanks, just rearranging some seats with all the interpreters in the room. We don't have cast of thousands. We have 6 in front of us for you at home who may not know. There are more of you online than there are in person. But it's nice to have a few people physically present in the room. Ciara and Caroline, what a phenomenally interesting presentation. I'm sure jaws are dropped at home thinking about the amount of work that's gone into this from your team and the houses of the Oireachtas. We rarely see how much work happens in the back end to make this possible. So congratulations and thank you both for all the time and energy you've put into this.
I would like one of you to come up and explain the nomination, because I think there's been some interesting news, if you wouldn't mind, Caroline.
Oh yeah, sorry, the civil service have an annual awards system which they have. And it's actually open to all government departments within the civil service, including the House of the Oireachtas. And the House of the Oireachtas pick a project that has been particularly valuable in that year. And so myself and Ciara submitted our project. We explained that we'd worked over the past 3 years on ISL and inclusion and accessibility. We completed our application for the project. We submitted it to see if the House of the Oireachtas would pick us as their nominee in the broader competition. And very luckily they did. So hopefully now next week, we're going to hear some very exciting news, hopefully, from the civil service selection process as to who's either won the award or who goes on to the next stage of the process.
I think we all have our fingers and toes crossed for that one. That's so exciting. And it really shows that the civil service recognizes the tireless work you've put into this. I'm sure there are questions and comments from people at home. Am I right? Can we? Are there, if anyone has questions, comments, now's your time. I have others looking after the technology, not myself. I have. So someone's asked for a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that will be sent on after this webinar today. Caroline O'Leary is relaying the comments to me, Teresa Lynch, that's then being interpreted to English by Romy. No questions, comments? Anyone in the room have any questions, comments?
Well, I have a comment.
So 80 words took an incredibly long time. It took a lot of patience, and it was determination and perseverance that kept us going to ensure we didn't give up. When we went and worked with the senior citizens and when we had that consultation, that also took quite a long time, and it was tiring and exhausting. I think in future we wouldn't do a list quite as extensive, just to keep our motivation and energy levels up, and so that we can keep going and it doesn't become too arduous. And as we've mentioned time and time again, it's so important to work with the deaf community. And we always have to remember there's pros and cons, right? Like, so it's amazing the positivity we've had, but we've also had people being like, why are you doing this? Like, what's the point of this institution? And when we're out in those spaces, when we see, what we always say is, if we see a deaf TD come into position, how are they going to operate and function as a minister? And then we kind of have this awareness raising, not only of ISL within the institution, but raising democracy and the importance of political participation by deaf community members. And this does empower deaf community members, right? Like, this is a step towards someone feeling comfortable to run for a ministerial position. It's a small step that we've worked on, but this is one way we can encourage more deaf political participation. We also did outreach with the schools. We also had open ISL awareness, and we had some TY students who visited the House of Oireachtas. They were hearing and they heard that we were there, and they wanted to meet us as Irish Sign Language interpreters. And we explained our role. So all the time we're building awareness. And part of this, coming back to the glossary, is a small step in a part of a much bigger jigsaw puzzle and a much bigger conversation. And we need all of you to emphasize, we need all of you looking at this glossary. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, positive, negative, criticism, please let us know. You come on screen there, Caroline. So Teresa's saying, you and Ciara also went to the World Association of Sign Language Interpreter conference, WASLI conference in Jeju, Korea, and gave a similar presentation with the same video material as far as I know. What do you think that created inspiration across other nations? Yeah, so Ciara and I, we were lucky, we were on the last day of the very extensive program at WASLI. So we had the opportunity to see what was before us and learn from their presentations before we began. We also had the opportunity to kind of advertise, come see our presentation. It is important to all. And we got really nice attendance. What was funny, on the list we were given. You say it in English.
We actually had, we left a piece of paper because we wanted to create a network of interpreters who work in parliamentary proceedings all around the world. And so we left a piece of paper for people to sign, but what was actually, it was on the back of a copy of the Irish Constitution, which no one else realised, but we realised and we appreciated. Then once we got home, we were able to create an email group with that list of contacts of parliaments around the world. And some have actually, straight away after some of these interpreters were able to contact us, there was one from Mauritius, who was working in the parliament there. Oh, sorry, no, the Maldives. There was another interpreter in the Kenyan parliament who were very interested in our work and as to how we went about setting up our ISL team. And as well, they were able to kind of discuss the challenges that they were facing as well, which we, of course, will understand from our parliamentary experience. We also work with the Interparliamentary Engagement Network from the Houses of the Oireachtas, and that's different departments and different sections within parliaments around the world. And we actually presented the same presentation to that network. And from that, we were contacted by a deaf community liaison person from the Scottish Parliament. We were able to meet with them to discuss our work and how we go about providing ISL access. So step by step, the work that we're doing in the Parliament is getting out there.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh yeah, Lorraine has a question. Come on, Lorraine. Of course Lorraine has a question, says Lorraine. Make sure you're on camera. Amazing. I really wanted to thank you both. I admire both of you for the amount of time and energy you've put into this. And this is democracy in action by what you're doing. And truly, I just wanted to thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to say, I'm nosy. You mentioned that some vocabulary were kept in fingerspelling format. Do you have an example of that? So there was two. We had senator.
You make a finger sign.
Which now is a finger sign of sorts. Oh yeah, I remember Teresa saying, and the other one was citizen. Because the community does often finger spell or finger sign citizen. So those were two for now.
State.
Heads of state. So state was the finger spelling in that
Same.
particular context.
Heads of bill.
Oh yeah, and heads of bill. That was another one because they're incredibly formal terms in parliamentary settings. And I'd just like to mention in the video, it is important we highlighted as well to keep finger spelling as it is a facet of Irish Sign Language. Like you mentioned, heads of state. In the United States of America, they have their own vocabulary for the different parts of the United States. So states is in Tennessee, is in Chicago. And that sign from ASL is not contextually the same as a head of state here in Ireland. So there was a bit of pride in keeping our finger spelling rather than usurping an American Sign Language term. And I believe we have two questions. So it's being relayed to Teresa. So one comment questions that there are different signs for the Houses of Oireachtas. And Caroline will clarify that. There is variations. We've got House and then two settings, House of Oireachtas. What we're showing, some people like to show the lower house versus the higher house, but if you have them on a similar status platform, that's also okay in signing space. There's also a question there. How did you know? How will you keep the list up to date? And how will we know? We will publicize heavily if there are any amendments. The House of the Oireachtas website does have a dictionary of English terms. Our 80 terms, the hot list that we really wanted the ISL terms for, we, as was mentioned, it's a living document. Long-term, what we would like is that there is the English dictionary and the ISL dictionary, and they would be on par with each other. That's the long-term goal, but remember, 80 terms of glossary took us 3 years, and it was a long 3 years. COVID did cause some delay, but still it's quite a huge process to undertake, and to ask people to give up so much of their time. A shorter list would be more efficient to build up the dictionary. And then there's one more question. Oh, so the question in relation to Parliament, like how do you distinguish the houses of Oireachtas from Parliament? Caroline's saying generally, when you're talking about countries, they have their own parliaments. In Belfast, they have Stormont, Parliament of Stormont. But in the Republic of Ireland, we have houses of the Oireachtas, and in that sign, what we're illustrating is the Dáil, the lower house of government, and the Seanad, which is the upper house of government. You can see the Dáil looks more parliamentary. It's about the seating in the Dáil room, but in the Senate, it's more of a semicircle because they do have a semicircular room, so they kind of visually depict the rooms they sit in. But that's how it works here in the Republic of Ireland. Around the world, they tend to have one parliamentary seating, which is why it's a single sign. Teresa's saying that's so interesting. And still, you mentioned it was a lengthy, hard work over the course of 3 years, but what's important is you didn't give up. That throughout the pandemic, throughout the lengthy consultations, getting all relevant stakeholders involved, including the expert committee as well, it's a lot of work, and you persevered, and look what you achieved. So thank you both, Caroline and Ciara, and a huge thank you to all who were involved with the team. Thank you to the Centre for Deaf Studies and the deaf interpreters who were involved as well, Teresa. Oh no, that was a huge credit to them, Teresa, saying really it was a big first step to have made. I remember when Caroline and Ciara asked us about this, about including the deaf students, we thought this is such an incredible opportunity, and we do need to pay credit to them for their work and their energy. Now we're just coming up to 6 o'clock. So things are coming to an end, Caroline, Ciara? What, sorry? Fergus, hello, Fergus. He has a question. You wanna?
Wanted to be with you.
It's all right. So Fergus is gonna sign and I can go into English. You need to go there so he can see you and look up. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, can you see me? Can everyone see me, yeah? Yeah, I could just see the heads of the two.
The wrong way because it's
Yeah, okay, I understand, no worries. Honestly, I've been watching the presentation with great fascination. I think it shows the immense work you've done, and it's incredible to see what the Houses of the Oireachtas have done. I wasn't aware of what's been going on the background. Maybe I missed it. I was asleep for a moment there, but at the same time, I can't be the only one who missed it. So that to the side, just wondering, Ciara, when you were giving your part of the presentation, you mentioned the front bench. So at the front, front F to the front bench. I was just wondering in relation that you signed front, but it looked like future. So I think whatever is up online, it's important that diction is clear so that there's no confusion. That's my feedback. But nonetheless, I really want to thank you for your fantastic presentation, both of you. Brilliant. Thank you all so much for your time and your attention. I think that brings us nicely to a close for this webinar and this in-person session. Wishing you all a lovely evening. We'll just get some photos.